And in Yemen, governance has been challenged by an al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorist organization that has launched attacks inside and outside of the country, by a secessionist movement in the south, and most recently by a rebel group in the north that has now spread across the country and challenged the sovereignty of the entire state.
International attention. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Kleffler in New York. That, of course, Secretary of State John Kerry, a little bit earlier today at Davos, describing the chaotic situation in Yemen. I want to go to ABC's Louis Martinez, who is standing by at the Pentagon. Louis, what is happening in Yemen? Both the president and the prime minister have resigned.
That's right, Dan. It's more than just them. It's actually the entire government cabinet that's resigned. So there is really no one in charge of Yemen right now. The parliament is going to meet in session on Sunday, and they're going to decide whether they want to accept the resignation of President Hadi and his cabinet, or whether they're going to decline it and name an interim president. Whether they're going to accept it and name an interim president. So this whole situation, as you heard there from Secretary Kerry, is all prompted by this group in the north. This is a tribal group known as the Houthis, and they are a Shiite group. This is a majority Sunni country, but yet these are a small minority, and they have taken over the capital of Sana'a. They've surrounded President Hadi around his house, and they were pressing for their demands. Their demands: greater autonomy for their region, also a greater fight against AQAP, which was the group that Secretary Kerry was also mentioning. Of course, that's al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Very key for the United States, what's going on in Yemen, because of the fight against counterterrorism, because AQAP being one of the main al-Qaeda branch right now that is targeting Western targets, and they're the ones that are claiming responsibility, or for having supported at least, the attacks in Paris that left so many people dead 2 weeks ago.
So who exactly is supporting this group? Who is supporting the Houthi? Where do they get their funding from? Where do they get their military support from?
So what you're hearing is that they are getting support from Iran. They are Shiite. Iran is a Shiite country as well. They provide assistance to Shiite minorities around the Arabian region. In this case, this is, again, a small group in the northwestern part of the country, which technically is where Sana'a is located as well. So they have access to the facilities there. It's very easy for them to move in that part of the country. And so they have gotten support from Iran. So if you look at some of the rhetoric that the Houthis push, it does kind of sound anti-American, but the key factor here is that they are also vigorously opposed to AQAP. They wanted Hadi's government to do more. They have actually joined in the fight against AQAP in parts of the south. Remember that this is not just a terror organization, but this is a terror group that actually controls territory. They control vast stretches of the eastern desert in Yemen, as well as southern territories.
And because of all of this movement and all this activities going on, that we are actually waiting on a press conference from the Rear Admiral John Kirby at the Pentagon there. We will take you there when that does begin. But Louis, explain to me then, why is Yemen so important? It's a relatively small country, but it's significant, though, for U.S. operations.
Yemen was a backwater for decades, Dan, and then when al-Qaeda morphed, let's not forget that Osama bin Laden is of Yemeni descent. His family made his fortune inside Saudi Arabia, and then he started al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is an offshoot group that is affiliated with al-Qaeda, while the United States' effort to defeat al-Qaeda core, as it's called, the group that bin Laden set up in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, while the drone strikes there have minimalized their impact worldwide. This offshoot, this franchise of al-Qaeda, which swore loyalty to al-Qaeda, they remain very vibrant and very active. The fact that they have created for themselves a safe haven in those desert regions that I was talking about, where they've set up training camps. We've seen flows of foreign fighters who've come in to support them. And the concern is that some of these foreign fighters have returned to their home countries, as we saw with one of the brothers involved in the Paris attacks. He had gone to Yemen about 3 years ago, had received training from al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, possibly combat training, and then returned to France. So the concern is about sleeper cells, the concern is about terrorism, the concern is that this is a country that serves as a safe haven for al-Qaeda, not just there, but for other regions, other parts of the region.
Well, speaking of other parts of the region there, what are other countries then doing as far as fighting this kind of movement?
Well, Saudi Arabia has been very key. Saudi Arabia shares a vast border along its southern flank there with Yemen. They are very key in maintaining the stability in that region because, of course, any instability in the Arabian Peninsula for them creates instability at home, as we've seen with the recent death, the recent passing of King Abdullah. There's concern about the continuity there. The issue there being that they want a continued reinforcements in the sense of continuing the resolve of the region against terrorist elements. And Yemen is just so key to that. So you've got basically all of the neighbors inside Saudi Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, looking for stability there because they want to contain al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula so that their reach doesn't affect them as well.
Louis, stay with us. I want to go over to the Rear Admiral who is speaking now.
The Military One Source call center in Virginia to thank the folks who work there for everything they do to support our men and women in uniform and their families. If you've ever worked with Military One Source or you know about them, you'll know that they provide information and support dealing with every single aspect of military life for anyone connected to it. It's available 24/7, completely free for our troops and families, both online and on the at militaryonesource.mil. And over the phone at 1-800-342-9647. Secretary Hagel has always believed that taking care of our people and their families is one of our highest and most solemn obligations, so he's really looking forward to personally expressing his gratitude to the Military One Source team. On Tuesday, Secretary Hagel will meet with the service secretaries, service chiefs, combatant commanders, and other senior DoD leaders to hold what will be most likely his final meeting of the Senior Leadership Council. While Secretary Hagel will, of course, be thanking the department's senior civilian and military leaders for their close partnership over his tenure, the meeting, like all gatherings of his Senior Leadership Council, will largely focus on the substantive issues facing the department, ranging from current events around the world to, of course, our budget proposals moving forward for the next fiscal year. There are a few things happening on Wednesday as well. As you may know, on Wednesday morning, the chiefs of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps will be testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee on the impact of sequestration on national security. Later in the morning, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Bob Work, will deliver a speech at the Center for New America's Security's 2015 Transatlantic Forum, which is going to be held at the Willard Hotel just across the river. His speech will focus on our new offset strategy and its implications for America's partners and allies. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, Secretary Hagel will attend the Armed Forces Farewell Tribute being held in his honor just down the road at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall. I would stress that even after this farewell parade, Secretary Hagel will continue to carry out the full responsibilities of his office, and that he will do so right up until the time his successor is confirmed and installed. And I just have a couple of other things as well. I want to just give you an update on counter-ISIL operations. Late last week, Friday, in fact, Secretary Hagel authorized an initial contingent of trainers and enablers to begin establishing training sites for the program to train and equip moderate Syrian opposition. We expect the first advanced detachment, less than 100, to arrive somewhere in the theater in the coming days, and the next wave of several hundred trainers and enablers will deploy in the next few weeks. I also want to make an announcement here on Ebola and our efforts, Operation United Assistance down in Liberia. As you know, we are providing critical support for the U.S. government Ebola virus response, bringing our unique capabilities, specifically speed and scale, to support the civilian-led response in West Africa. At the request of the Liberian government, as part of this whole-of-government approach, led by USAID, the Department of Defense has mobilized and adapted its resources in a very austere environment, supporting a critical mission. Our rapid deployment of personnel, from engineers to logisticians, provided for the international civilian response by NGOs, USAID, and the UN to grow their capability and capacity on the ground. We are now backing more than 10,000 civilian responders on the ground in the various Ebola-affected areas. This is the United States, not the U.S. military. The United States is now backing more than 10,000 civilian responders in affected areas, providing direct and indirect healthcare support, as well as many other functions that were being handled by Operation United Assistance. So therefore, the decision has now been made that the ongoing work of Operation United Assistance does not require several National Guard units that were initially considered for deployment. We are confident that we can meet the continuing needs of this mission without activating these reservists. We still have, and I think this is important to note, more than 2,300 U.S. military personnel serving in Liberia and Senegal in support of outbreak response efforts. We will have more to say about the next phase of the operation in the weeks ahead, of course, as more work is completed and as we press for additional progress against this epidemic. And with that, take some questions. Yep. Lita.
John, just on the Syria training, can you be a little bit more specific? You said about less than 100 will go initially. Which of the trainings, which of the countries will they be going to? This is Turkey, Saudi, there's several sites, and then how many in that second wave? And thirdly, does this suggest then that things are starting to move and we could see training actually begin soon, or where's the vetting process stand at this point?
So we expect this advanced element, which is again less than 100, to be spread out across the multiple sites. And I don't have an exact breakdown for you, Lita. I'd point you to General Nagata and his team at Central Command there to speak to how they're going to break it up. Again, this is just this advanced element is just their sort of a survey team, if you will. They're going to go out to the sites, take a look at what's there, and prepare for further deployments. I'm sorry, and your other questions?
What's that? How large is that second group, and is that will that group be targeted to one site, or is that also across many?
We're still working through the sourcing solution on the follow-on trainers. I think we're looking at several hundred, as I said, and I don't have any announcements to make on that. As I told you before, when we are able to, like today, make an announcement, we certainly will. I just don't have the specifics on that, but I think you will see, as we've said in following weeks, additional trainers going to each of those sites, and the breakdown we'll just have to get there when we get the sourcing solution. So just don't know right now. What was your question on the vetting?
What about and what does this say about will it start? Will they be able to start training in March, or is vetting?
Well, as I said last week, General Nagata is confident that if things remain on track, and sending this advanced element in the next few days or couple of weeks or so, that constitutes staying on track. So if everything stays on track and we get the additional trainers, we do believe that we'll be able to start training in the early spring timeframe. I would be reticent to put a week or even a month on it, but in the early spring. And that's an if, Lita, and I mean, that depends on a lot of factors. So right now, signs are looking good, things are moving in the right direction, but I want to stress what I said last week, and it's still true today. Active recruiting has not taken place. We've had some initial discussions with moderate opposition leaders in Istanbul. General Nagata did very productive, good meetings, but it didn't lead to specific people signing up yet. So we still got a lot of work to do. John.
Can you say which units these initial 100 troops or so are coming from, and are they special operators or conventional?
I'm not gonna identify specific units. It's mostly special operations forces, but I won't identify actual units. Yeah. Go ahead.
On Yemen, how confident are you all that you know what's going on the ground there, and how confident also are you in whatever assets are there are enough that if the Iranian-backed rebels start to turn on diplomatic compounds, specifically the embassy, that you have enough assets to keep the embassy safe and then to evacuate U.S. personnel?
Well, let me start by saying the situation is still very unclear, and we are monitoring it as closely as we can, but it's not clear right now in whose hands the government is or will be in the future. So that's something that we're in close touch with our...
Questions that you have about who's in charge, that you have questions and you don't have answers to.
That's correct. We don't have a full picture right now of the political situation in Yemen, nor are we in a position to predict exactly where it's going to go. So let me just put that right out there. To your second question, obviously protection of our personnel, whether they're military or not, American citizens, is obviously a key priority for us. As you know, we have resources in the region, at sea particularly, that are ready to respond if need be at the request of the State Department. There's no need for that right now. And again, I would just tell you that as part of this new normal environment that we've been in now for more than a year, we take security risks in that particular part of the world very seriously, and the combatant commander has resources and assets at his disposal should he need them. Christina.
Thanks, Admiral. Has the DoD reduced any DoD personnel in Yemen, and is there any kind of review or discussion going on about the military presence U.S. military presence in Yemen, or perhaps counterterrorism efforts there?
Well, as you know, Christina, we don't detail with any specificity the amount of personnel that we have in Yemen. I'm not going to start doing that today. There is a footprint of U.S. military personnel in there that have been dedicated to counterterrorism operations. They are still there. It is something we monitor every single day, even without the events of the last 24 hours. It's something that we're always mindful of, and that presence fluctuates and has fluctuated. Will continue to fluctuate, given the security situation on the ground and, frankly, the counterterrorism threats and challenges and opportunities there that we're facing.
But has there been any reduction of DoD personnel specifically from the embassy?
From the embassy. There's been no reduction of U.S. military personnel from embassy security duties in Yemen. No. David?
In the last week or so, we've had a number of facts stated about the war against ISIS without putting them in context. We asked you, I think it was last week, 700 kilometers regained, square kilometers regained, out of how many? What percentage of land that ISIS once held does that represent? We now have senior officials saying that half the ISIS leadership has been killed. Is that 1 of 2 or 10 of 20?
Right.
And also the 6,000 fighters out of how many?
Right. Let me see if I can provide a little bit of context on that, David. On the first of all, on the numbers of fighters killed, I want to revisit, because I thought Secretary Hagel was very strong on this yesterday. What he said, and numbers of killed, while it is something we're mindful of, they are estimates only, and they are not being used by this department or Central Command as a measure of overall success. It is certainly something we're mindful of because it goes to the ability to degrade their capability, but it's not the metric of success, and it's not a metric that we're going to hang our hat on when it comes to talking to the success of this strategy. That said, the estimates on ISIL strength vary very greatly. This is not a uniformed army with identification cards and recruiting posters. So it's hard to say at any given time how many fighters they have in the field. And I would also point out that their fighters come and go. Not everybody stays, for the duration. It's not an organized force. The estimates put out earlier still stand that the estimates of their strength is somewhere between 20 and 30,000. That's a pretty broad range because, as I said, it fluctuates. So if you take the 6,000 figure that was acknowledged yesterday, if I were you looking for perspective, I'd say it's that number out of somewhere between 20 and 30,000. But I really want to stress again that that's not a hard and fast figure. It's not a figure that we're paying an exaggerated amount of attention to, and the denominator there of 20 to 30,000 obviously changes and fluctuates all the time. So that's that. On the land, the 700 square kilometers that we talked about, which is, I guess, roughly about 300 square miles, we assess that land retaken from ISIL is largely in the north and has been taken back largely by Kurdish forces, Peshmerga. And just to put it in perspective, as we stand here today, and again, I want to stress that these figures change. So just let me put that out as preamble. Right now, I think the general assessment is that in assessed areas of Iraq, I'm talking about Iraq, and I'm talking about those areas that matter and that we are able to assess. So this isn't the whole landmass of the country, because there are very vast parts of Iraq that are unpopulated and not in contention and frankly aren't relevant. But in those areas of Iraq that are, you're looking at roughly 55,000 square miles that ISIL has control or dominance over, roughly, in comparison to 77 some odd square kilometers that the Iraqi government has control or dominance over. And then there's about a rough amount, 56 or so thousand square kilometers that Kurdish forces have control or dominance over. So that's about 188,000 total square kilometers. I did the math before I came out here. I'm pretty sure that's right. Of assessed area in Iraq. And I want to stress again, it's assessed area. It's not the entire landmass of Iraq. So there's a little bit of perspective.
For a second, you were bouncing back between miles and...
oh, I'm sorry. Did I do that? So all these figures are square kilometers.
When you said 55,000 square miles, you meant square kilometers.
Square kilometers. I apologize. Dang it. I thought I was going to get that right. 77,000. 55,000 square kilometers right now is assessed at dominated by ISIL. 77,000 square kilometers roughly assessed as dominated or controlled by the Iraqi government out of Baghdad. 56,000 square kilometers assessed to be under Kurdish control. Now, look, guys, again, I'm trying to help you answer your question, but I want to stress again, these numbers fluctuate over time. They will change. They will continue to change. I also want to point out that, and we haven't said this in a while, but it's worth repeating, this is going to be a long struggle. I know we all want figures and facts and numbers that indicate all measures of success and or struggle. But it's going to change over time. It's going to continue to change over time, and that's not simply even those figures are not simply the only metrics of success here. You had something else. The leadership, I don't know. I've seen the press reporting of half the leadership. I don't know what that equates to. I'd point you to CENTCOM. I don't have an assessment of what their leadership roster looks like. Again, leaders come and go, and this isn't an organized army with a bill of fare there where everybody has a billet that they're filling. So it depends on what you mean by leader and at what level. I don't have that kind of context today.
We're going to continue to listen in to this news conference held by Rear Admiral John Kirby at the Pentagon there, specifically taking some questions about the situation in Yemen. For details on that, I want to go to our Louis Martinez. And Louis, what did we learn about that? Because we were talking a little bit earlier, the fact that you have the head of that country essentially being powerless, essentially offering resignations, and now, in fact, how does the military from the U.S. side of things intervene? What did we learn? Any plans from this?
Very little plans, but a lot of concern about the situation there in Yemen right now. And they're just as in the dark as we are, it sounds like. You heard Admiral Kirby say that the situation there is very unclear, that they're not going to get into the business of predicting there because it's very difficult. And you heard him say that they're trying to see who actually ends up being in charge of Yemen. Right now, it looks like that might have to wait until Sunday when the parliament comes back into session, and they're going to decide on whether to accept the resignation of President Hadi and his government. So a lot of uncertainty there, not just on our part, but on the part of the federal government here in the U.S. But you heard Kirby talk about the situation there and how the United States stands ready to assist any American citizens at the U.S. Embassy or outside, with the presence there of 2 U.S. amphibious ships in the Red Sea. They're equipped with tilt-rotor Ospreys that can get people out very quickly if they had to. These are Marine aircraft, and of course a complement of Marines aboard that could assist. He was asked whether any U.S. military personnel in Yemen had left, and he said that had not happened. And there was an interesting discussion there about exactly who the U.S. forces inside Yemen are. You heard him talk about the embassy presence of Marines. We know from our reporting that there are about 100 Marines there at the U.S. Embassy providing security there. But he also talked about those military forces involved in counterterrorism. Then you heard him talk, he's very vague about the numbers there, and about whether there had been any reductions in their force levels over the past year or so. He said that it fluctuates routinely, but he was very vague about whether anything had actually been reduced in their numbers recently as a result of the ongoing crisis.
So, Louis, then basically listening to what the Rear Admiral had to say and looking at the military presence there, is there any likely next steps then, whether it be on a military or even a diplomatic front?
Well, diplomatically, the United States has to continue to show the flag. I think that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing anything from the State Department to indicate that they want to evacuate all of their personnel. Now, there was a reduction, a small number of staffers were left last night. We believe that was through commercial aviation. The reason that you have the U.S. Navy and the Marines offshore in the Red Sea is in case the situation gets even dicier. And the preferred mode of transport, which is commercial aviation, is unavailable. That's the extreme option. That's why those Marines are there. That's why there are probably other plans that we don't know about that have been prepared just in case. But for now, as you heard Kirby say, the United States and the State Department has not ordered the assistance of the U.S. military to help get them out. That's what they're there for. And indications are that it seems that the United States wants to keep the U.S. Embassy open. They want to be able to maintain that presence, not only because of the situation there right now, but because of the future, because they want to be able to deal with whoever ends up in charge inside Yemen, and that remains to be seen. So until that gets resolved, I think that's where you're not going to get any full closure in short order.
Complicated equation. ABC's Louis Martinez at the Pentagon. Louis, thank you for that.
Thank you.
You can keep up with the story in real time as it develops by downloading the ABC News app and starring the story for exclusive updates on the go. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York.